Hello, everybody. Daniel from the Venza Dutch office, welcoming you to yet another webinar. Today's topic: security during transition, and we've got a couple of industry experts here to keep us honest, and a frequent presenter, our CTO, the big man in charge of all things technology. David Neel is going to present on the topic of security during transition. So we'll hear from David in a moment. But before we do, let's find out, Carlos and Tom, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourselves, where you're located, what hotel group you work for, and yeah. So Carlos, do you mind starting?
No, thank you. I'm Carlos Herrera. I'm Director of IT for AM Resorts. AM Resorts is a hospitality company that we have presence in all Americas and some parts in Europe. Caribbean islands, also. Yeah. Right now we are part also of Hyatt Hotel. Just AMRs, we are 110 hotels, and as part of the Hyatt hotels, we are more than 1,200 hotels right now worldwide. I'm located right now in our very brand new offices in Cancun, downtown Cancun, Mexico. So nice to be here with you.
Yeah. Brand new office, brand new desk. You can take the pen knife out and put Carlos was here. Mark your desk for the future. That's in a brand new desk. Right. Tom, tell us about yourself. Tom Stoffo.
Sure. Tom Stoffo, Director of Technology for Mainsail Lodging and Development. We're based out of Tampa, Florida. We're a Marriott franchise, but not 100% Marriott. We also do independent hotels and so forth on that. We currently we just took on our 13th operating hotel last week, and we're growing in the Georgia, Florida market. So we got more to come.
Okay. Fantastic. We heard that you might not be able to make it today because of you're in the middle of transitioning properties, and so how ironic, but we appreciate you taking time to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. We just finished up transition of a property up in the New Hampshire area last week. So we finished up on Friday, so it worked out great.
Okay, very great. Nice to have you. Well, today we've got on the topic of security during transition, we've got on our screen, as is our style for these 30-minute webinars, just some brief bullet points. Not we don't want to kill anybody with a long PowerPoint presentation. So the goal is to whatever we can get on a single page. That's we try to rein in David and the other presenters who are a wealth of knowledge, but rein them into to a single page. So that's your canvas to play and to paint the picture of security during transition. David Neel, before you launch into it, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself for those that haven't had a chance to meet you.
Yeah, so my name is David Neel. I am the CTO of CyberTek and working very tightly with Venza. Venza acquired my company, which was CyberTek Engineering, after 25 years, and we're now year and a half into our transition, and most everything has been merged into one company with the vertical of hospitality, leaning very close to our big brother there in the Venza land. But I bring in a lot of corporate acquisitions and sell-offs in the 25 years prior to that. I've always been involved in corporate, mostly into the chemical world and into a lot of other banking environments. So was able to create a lot of processes, I guess you would say, in the acquisition or selling off. Been on both sides of that table, and yeah, try to bring some more information to the table now.
Very good. Well, we see. Thank you so much, David, for taking time to present. Busy guy, and taking time to assemble some material and present for us. And for those that are attending for the first time, a Venza CyberTek webinar. The reason Tom and Carlos are here is as I'd mentioned earlier, is to keep us honest, make sure that the information that's being shared resonates with leaders in the hospitality industry. So throughout the presentation, I'll be asking Tom and Carlos your thoughts, if that jives with your experience as well. So right at the top of the upper left, starting in the upper left as we do, hospitality transition industry dynamism. So I mentioned to the guys just before we launched the webinar, I'm currently in a property sort of experience that is sort of experiencing a bit of transition. It is operated, I guess traditionally it has been operated by our friends over at Apollo, but Apollo has, and through a merger with Leonardo Hotels, so that still says Apollo on the phone right next to me, but it's a Leonardo property at the flying the Leonardo flag here in Winkelveen outside of Amsterdam. So industry dynamism. What can you say about the hospitality transitions and the history of it there, David?
Well, what I have seen is there's all kinds of different things. Like I said, I'm newer to this and the more of the corporate acquisition side than this. So there's a lot of things going on now, and I think it will continue from everything I'm reading. I think there's more acquisitions. As Tom just said, he did one, just finishing up one. Carlos, I'm sure you've had several of them, either not planned, but just completed. And we're seeing this to be more of a third phase. It's either I'm selling, I'm transitioning, or I'm buying. It's one of the three. You're never in a static environment where you're like, no, this is all we're going to do. Every one of the management groups we're dealing with, transition is what they're talking about, because either they're selling off, they're in the midst of one, or they're getting ready to buy another one. Those are the three phases I'm seeing right now.
Yeah. Okay. Carlos?
Go ahead.
Go
no,
ahead.
in our case, we are a 100% management company. So all the hotels are when we usually do not acquire hotels, so basically are managed more like a franchises, but it is under management control. So the 100% of hotels of AMR, are managed by. So we do not have any other kind of situation like that, just the managing contracts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned growth, and as did you, Tom. More, are you seeing more? It's the acquisition of new properties or bringing them into the management group, and then
yes, of course. But it is the same on the management composition. Let's say like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you too, Tom? Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of started before, I would say, before COVID. It was pretty hot back then too, buying, selling, rebranding, things like that. Then we had a kind of slow post during COVID. I feel like industry wide, and then it kind of accelerated here over the last 12 months. That's what we're seeing industry wide. Our strategy is that we push through, and we took I would say, we did not stop. So we were we built 5 hotels in the last 12, 13 months, in the COVID world, I would say, and then coming out of COVID, position ourselves. Transitions are starting to come back very fast and furious as well. And also the type of, I would say, strategic alliances. For example, transition, I would say our last transition we did was, okay, we're the team that can get you a branded model, so we can do, we leverage those relationships as well on it. So So we, so we provide that advantage. Hey, we'll have the guidance and full support to get the ownership group to get where they want to be at as well. So, so it's just not acquisitions and taking over then day by day. It's the reason why that we're transitioning hotels now. And I think the ownership groups are starting to see that with the management companies and how well we can fit, align the philosophies in those management companies.
Right. Yeah, super important. They need to have management companies that get the brand and can deliver against it, deliver a product. So the hospitality transitions, you're saying, David, it's future trend. Tom is here to testify that it's been accelerating, and we're seeing more and more. Okay, so you say that there are some inherited risks. What do you got for us on that, David?
Well, here's and I'm coming from the side here. We have handled this from both sides, and what you don't know, you don't know. And so we've had different scans. They're saying, oh yeah, we've got, let's say 500 different objects on the network. We scan, we find 720. And we're like, what don't you know about your own network? And Tom's laughing. I mean, it happens. IoT devices happen. There's an AP that's sitting in the parking garage that Johnny's got his phone hooked up to it, so he can watch a video sitting in the parking garage. I mean, we've seen all kinds of things, and the vulnerability that's exposed is you don't know what's out there. And in that, you open yourself up to all kinds of breach possibilities, because if you don't know, you don't know. And that's what we've been finding, is the level of tools used by the seller may not necessarily be up to what the buyer and or the transition team is using. And so what do we do when we have 200 new devices that are not on anybody's documentation list?
Well, I don't want to get on anybody's list, but you're saying which department usually has the most rogue IT. But that's, is it, Carlos, Tom, is that what you're experiencing when there's a transition? You're finding that the tech stack is a little more involved than you had been led to believe?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Definitely. Well, in our cases, we are some kind of used to have this inherited technology, because again, we are a 100% management company, so we need to take care of that in a very detailed and very strong way. We can't. I mean, security thing is something that we always are tracking, and I'm seeing in your next topic that patching is one of the biggest thing that we take care of prior to get connected to our network, because inherited technology, and not only computers, I'm referring also to the infrastructure, switches, IoT devices, and everything. You should be sure, or at least know what and where are those equipment in regards to the operating system is patching and where. So if don't, you have a huge breach point on those. So and it is some kind difficult to find out, So why you should have a very dedicated intake process on that.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm watching as Carlos is speaking. I'm watching Tom's expression. Tom, you're nodding. You're laughing along. Yeah.
Every single transition I have done in my career, we find a gotcha. That's just the nature of it. So we'll find someone's rogue AP somewhere. We'll find those little 5-port mini switches sitting on top of someone's desk. We run into server rooms are I would say less than security or PCI compliance. So we've seen it all, and we kind of expect it. Walk into the property. The worst thing, I'd rather get an answer of someone saying I don't know what I have than someone that comes in and says, hey, we got 200 endpoints and X, Y, and Z, and here you go. And then you're looking at one closet, and then and then you turn around and say, well, what about all this equipment over here? And oh yeah, about that, and that creates another thing. So I smirk and laugh because I tell my team this is that it's always a discovery process, and always kind of expect the unexpected. So you never know what you're going to get into until you really get in there. So.
Yeah, I refer to it as a box of Cracker Jacks. You're looking for the Coupe de Ville, and you end up with a bunch of nuts. It's just amazing what you find because, like I mentioned to one of the guys, they don't know. They don't know what's connected to their network. Or we had one, we walked in and we saw, I think it was 5 48-port switches, and they said they had 100 devices. And I'm like, well, then what else is plugged into this thing if that's all you have? And they're like, oh, well, it's old stuff. I'm like, it's all lit up. I got more concerned at that point, which we can talk about later.
Yeah. So let's talk. Tom brought up briefly PCI DSS. So you've got a bullet point there: prior regulatory non-compliance. Talk to us about that, then, David.
Well, with that, if the seller is full PCI, your life can be a whole lot easier because they have all the processes in place, or they should. They should have data mapping all laid out, and you should get a very good layout of the process. Now, if they just pencil whip that form, and they said they did, yeah, well, I'm just saying, somehow they're at the selling table. But if they are at the selling table and they have their PCI compliance documented completely, you've already got the processes, you already know how their network is designed, you know where everything is and that it's updated, you hope the document is current. Then with that, your job becomes a whole lot easier. Prior to that, I'm going back to what Tom said. Hey, we've got 100 devices. Here's our domain admin password. See you later, and we're out. But with the documents of PCI being fulfilled, that does make the transition a whole lot easier based upon the document provided.
So let me ask Carlos, Tom, having an AOC in place, some type of compliance, whether it be PCI or it could be
or NIST.
That's right. Yeah, is that the case? If they have a compliance in place, does that bring down the temperature a little bit? You're like, well, okay, I have a better idea, or does it not much matter to you guys?
Well, for us, definitely does. We are in the process actually to certify all the hotels in IM resorts. They were certified, but we are reinforcing that. Right now we are a public company, so that's a very high topic thing that we have, and one of the high priorities. Yes, and for us it is very important to have the 100% of the hotels compliance with no matters of the country, of course.
Yeah. Whether you are moving a property off the portfolio or having some compliances in place is pretty Tom, yeah, same with you?
Yeah, it depends on what the version of meaning of PCI means. And again, in my experience, I walk in and we do due diligence before we walk in and stuff. But part of the questionnaire is like, okay, are you PCI compliant? Yes, we have pin pads sitting on the front desk. Well, that doesn't mean that you're 100% compliant, but they'll sell that to the buyer. Oh yeah, we have this, and we're upgraded on this PMS, but there's no documentation anywhere. There's nothing. There's no prior history. It's part of the PCI compliance. You got to have change orders or change. So no one's again. No one's really 100%. I don't believe we're 100%. Our goal is to get there 100%. So I don't expect other management companies to come or taking over a property to be fully 100%. But it would be nice to have a CDE diagram. It would be nice to have an inventory out there. You know,
recognize that they're on the journey and that they've got a roadmap at least of where they're heading.
Exactly. So, and that tells you that will tell that kind of information will also tell you what kind of organization is within that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
On there. So you know, again, I kind of take the approach is we'll come in, we'll work with them, do a due diligence, and you know, we're not expecting that 100%, but you know, the more they can give us, the better risk management we will, you know, we can do to mitigate parts of our transition plan going in.
Yeah.
So again, it's never 100%. I have yet seen 100%. You know, I don't want to be the pessimist. You know, and I'm not saying these properties we took over is, you know, less than standard. It's just that, you know, most properties, and David, you probably seen a lot of this, they just need guidance. And
Yes.
that's the big trick. So the more we get, the better it is, and the better organized, and it seems the better the transition will go. So.
Yeah. Speaking of on the topic of guidance, so it sounds like we've kind of slid into the managing transitions topic. But before we get there, any of these other bullet points, risks during transition and due diligence, kind of touched a little bit about this as we've been going through the conversation. Anything you're burning to share there, David, on those?
Well, I mean, Tom hit it on the head. If, you know, they don't know what they don't know, and that I don't condemn the ones selling or buying, whichever side of that, you know, they just don't know. And so a lot of these are looking for guidance. They're in, you know, there's a reason they're selling, and a lot of times they're like, hey, we can't keep up. We've had that in corporate world where they're like, you know, hey, this is moving faster than we are, and we're not comfortable where we are. But with that, Carlos mentioned the patchwork integration. That is becoming a very big thing, because two of the ones I have in mind, they were using another third-party service to do a lot of their MSP work, and then that was not going to be there, but there was no handoff from the third party. And so we ended up with, this got stripped off, and what were they doing? Were they patching? How were they patching? What were they using? You know, everything from EDRs to backups. And if that third party is involved, now we're 3 parties away from that. And so there's a lot of transition there. There needs to be a very nice handoff. And I'm very, strong with the staff that we have. We have to make sure we're friendly with this other MSP, because these tables could be turned 6 months later on a different property, different customer. And if you piss them off, then guess what you're going to get back on the next, you know, bounce. There has to be a smooth transition, a nice handshake between all parties. And third parties, I think, are becoming a much bigger deal, because less and less is being performed in-house. So that transition, that patchwork integration, that has to be a vital part of the conversation up front.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree with you. Another thing that we should take care of also is you know, APIs, communication between the systems. Sometimes they forget about any kind of securities in the communication between the systems, and you have a very, very huge security point of break over there. So the analysis of the communication between the systems, APIs, integrations, even though the serial communication, it's a very important thing to consider also during this, you know, risk assessment that you should have during the transition.
Yeah.
So I think, how was I word this? I think how I go into transitions is one way, and the biggest key is relationship management above all. So I tend to create those relationships with, like David said, with these outgoing groups, because again, you know, in my career, I see them come, see them go, and the tables will turn. You know, with the deposition out. You know, it's a small world out there, especially in our field. So relationship management and creating these relationships can go a long way. Even with, you know, would say, hey, here's our standard handoff, but by the way, here's our here's what we're working on. Here's a couple of things that I think you should be concerned about going into that's not necessarily in paper or in some kind of spreadsheet on there. So usually I try to create these relationships as soon as we find out, and I spend more time on that field than I actually do technically. That's kind of like my secret sauce I put out there. It's all about leveraging the relationships, and you'll get, I feel like you get more out and get more information, because these are the guys that have been in the trenches, and now, they're leaving, and sometimes they may be happy that they're leaving, but on there. But creating those relationships will help you tremendously before, during, and after these transitions. So that's kind of how I look at that when coming to a handoff. So
actually, I'm sorry, Tom. I believe that's pretty important that you're saying that this to let's say leverage those relationships with the third-party vendors, because in so many cases you inherit also the third party, and in some cases, surprisingly, they don't know even that right now change their mind sometimes to be on the same way. You are co-responsible right now with the information. Sometimes they are also surprised about that. So change their mind, leverage those relationships during the transitions is definitely a huge thing to achieve.
Thank you, Carlos.
I think it's almost prescient, the little this diagram logo here that Sean Shields and the marketing team have put together for this. The focus of the properties, but certainly those people that are in that circle, and it's very much a key part of it. And not thinking otherwise is myopic. Being aware that the transition might be heading one direction today, 6 months now it could be another direction. Very, very good advice, guys. Dave, we did start a little late, but we are sort of around a half an hour mark. David, Neel, anything else that you're burning to share during this?
I would say that, and we'd be more than happy to help on the transitions. Our checklist right now is about 92 objects, and that changes. So just because you did it this way last year or 6 months ago doesn't mean that document is static and is able to say, this is all we do, this is like Tom was saying, it is an open game out there, and it's like, hey, we just found out this, and we now know a little bit more about if an MSP was in front of us, what their standards are and what we can kind of look for. And then it's kind of like, okay, they're going to be doing it this way. This is what we have to watch for. And then it teaches us every time we do one, our document gets better. And we're leaning into that heavily as more and more of these things are starting to happen, that our document is becoming more refined but never complete.
So you're saying that hospitality technology is evolving? What?
Kicking and screaming, that little baby is learning to walk right now.
That's right. Very, very great. Did the things that have been shared today, Tom and Carlos, resonating with you? Anything in particular that you guys are just burning to share, or say, yeah, this is the focus? I think Tom is. Maybe bring the fries with the management. Management is a personality is so important to people. Yeah, Carlos, you're about to say.
Yeah, sorry. Well, definitely to have a very strong intake process for the transitions is a good thing to have. Very well-defined policies. The checklist you mentioned actually are a very important part of the transition, to know the infrastructure, to know the system, to start looking for risks on that inherited infrastructure. So I would say have a very strong intake process for the transition is a good thing to have, right?
Yeah. Processes, policies, checklists, not necessarily the sexy items out there, but man, they can make your life a lot easier.
And you know what? Not only for the property per se, also for the locations. We are used to have two assessments. For one for the location. I mean, what are the services on the location, the country? Sometimes Caribbean islands, for example, those services are pretty difficult to fill out. You know, so you need to be prepared to how we wanna replace one for the other one. So also know the location, not only the property, is a good thing to have also.
The larger community around the property as well.
Yeah, let me throw in one thing, and not to extend it beyond longer than our time. The other thing I have found is we had talked about the third party to third party, but also the staff. So when I've been involved with this, the staff is heavily concerned. What do you mean I'm changing my email address? What they're concerned in the transition. So you have to have that open dialogue with them and say, hey, this is what we're doing. And have them, because they're fearful, they're seeing a lot of changes happening, and they're all looking to say, you know, does that mean I'm losing my job? I'm like, no, you're just getting a different email address. You got the same. What anything to do with that? We're just moving the technical side. So that transition has to involve the staffing, because they're worried. I mean, you know, it may come down from on top that everything's the same. In the back room, they're asking questions. What do you know? And I'm like, I'm just here to do the technical geeky stuff. So, but yeah, that same thing. Yeah, it is scary.
Yeah, I agree with that. Over communication, make sure that you have your plan of action ready to go before you arrive on site. Communicate it out. Whatever plan that you have, make sure you have a plan, and that's you know, with the guidelines. Because once it's go time at 12:01 at X date, and it's time to transition, you'll never know where you're going to get, and so forth, things like that. But if you stick to the plan, the risk will, you'll have less of a risk, and then you can better manage the gotchas that you'll run into, and you will have gotchas. That is in every property. It doesn't matter if it's 200 rooms or 2,000 rooms. It's all the same, you know, with the gotchas. But above all, kind of what David was saying, is that you're on site, you are the leader or part of the leadership team that is coming in. You know, you have the marketing, sales, accounting, you have the disciplines come in. You are the first impression of the staff there. Now, you know, and I was told a long time ago, you were hired to do a job, and everybody believed that you can do the job. That's what we're hired to do. So, but how to react when, you know, issues arrive, you know, risks arrives and things, and how do you, I would say, manage and mitigate those and resolve that. That will bring confidence to that staff that is, oh my God, what happened here? You know, everything is changing attitude, and say, well, you know, these guys know what they're doing. Even though, you know, in the back of your head, you may not know, and be like, oh no, we try to figure it out. But, you know, but we portrayed that to the staff. It was like, yeah, we're leaders here, and you're welcome to our team. You're a great addition to our management or ownership group, and we'd love to have you here and see what we can do together on there. And then you'll see a different reaction from that. People feel less
threatened.
Threatened. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, so appreciate, all of us at Venza appreciate you gentlemen taking time. We are a little over time, started a little bit late, but you guys were real generous by giving us a few more minutes of your time. And David, fantastic job. Carlos,
thank you, sir.
You guys appreciate you doing this for the industry. We will see those of you out there. We will see you next time at the next webinar. Stay tuned for the upcoming schedule of webinars throughout the fourth quarter, and a possible alliance with another organization. So I'm going to zip the lip and not reveal until it's ready. But expect some fun new things coming up with webinars from Venza this year. So thanks, everybody. We'll see
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Regards.
Go on.
Saludos. Bye.
We will be ending the webinar for everyone. Thank you.